Instructor Valek glided to the center of the amphitheater on spindly limbs, each footfall clicking softly against the polished obsidian floor. 7 eyes blinked in perfect sequence as he scanned the rows of cadets assembled before him. Species. From across the Orion arm, every one of them bright, young, and mostly unscarred by failure. Behind him, a holographic starfield shimmered, coalescing into a spinning, red-tinted planet with jagged wind patterns pulsing across its equator. The display flickered slightly, heat distortion simulated for effect. Drosk 7, Valek announced, his voice a gravelly echo reinforced by microsonic amplifiers. A world so unforgiving, it burns arrogance before breakfast. A few chuckles rippled through the hall, mostly from the Vrixi and the Danari. The humans remained quiet. Valek noticed. He always did. The planet is classified as a Class 9 death world, he continued. Surface temperatures reach 170 degrees Celsius during peak orbital proximity. Atmospheric composition includes sulfuric particulate storms, enough to flay unshielded flesh in under 8 seconds. The starfield shifted again, showing archival footage, scorched wreckage, heat-fried drones, time-lapsed vistas of blistering storms erasing all traces of settlement attempts. One video ended with a transmission cut-off mid-scream. Another showed a Zalithi outpost sinking into liquefied ground. Valek's mandibles flexed in what his species considered a grin. No species has survived colonization, not for long. Some tried. None endured. He let that silence hang in the air, dramatic and final. And then the human raised her hand. Valek saw it in the corner of his third peripheral eye, a small, precise gesture from Cadet Carabel, seated at the back, arms crossed but expression calm. The humans always sat near exits, always prepared. Yes, Cadet Bell? Valek asked, a note of irritation threading through his voice. I'm sorry, Instructor, she said, standing. But that statement isn't accurate anymore. A low murmur spread among the cadets. One Vrixi tilted their head, vocalizing a questioning chime. The holoprojector paused. Valek's upper eyes twitched. Explain, he said. Bell nodded toward the hologram. Drosk 7 was declared uninhabitable by the Galactic Council in 2371. That remained true, until Captain Serena Holt led an unsanctioned landing party in 2396. Valek blinked twice. Captain Holt's expedition was never confirmed to have survived beyond initial deployment. Bell reached into her jacket, withdrew a small chip, and flicked it toward the holonode. The room gasped as the simulation flickered, then reloaded. This time it showed a live feed. A red sun burned low, on the horizon of Drosk 7. Dust clouds churned like titanic ghosts. But below it, nestled in the rock and shimmering with reinforced glass domes, stood Fort Holt, a human settlement. Smoke plumed from geothermal vents. Towering metal pylons reached into the atmosphere. Figures moved between structures in bulky, sand-colored exosuits. One paused to wave at the camera drone. Valek stepped closer, scanning the telemetry. His hands twitched involuntarily. Atmospheric pressure stable. Humidity artificially maintained. Population, 4,102. His voice dropped to a whisper. Impossible. Bell's face remained composed. They've been operational for 21 years, Instructor. Fort Holt isn't just surviving, it's expanding. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. A Danari cadet muttered, no shielding satellites, no terraforming drones. How? They adapted, Bell replied. They built down, not up. Turned the planet's geothermal fury into energy. Used the storm cycles for water reclamation. They didn't fight the planet. They made it part of their strategy. Valek's mind reeled. This wasn't a new entry in the database. This wasn't even recent. Somehow this monumental achievement had slipped past every xenobiological briefing he'd ever received. A younger Thalkiran instructor leaned in from the side bench. This was never in our databanks. No, Valek murmured. It wasn't. Cadet Bell took her seat again, arms crossed once more. I think, sir, you might want to update the lesson plan. The silence that followed wasn't from shock. It was reverence tinged with a sharp edge of fear. Velik turned back to the display. The red planet continued to turn, now less a symbol of death, and more a question mark scrawled across the stars. What kind of species doesn't stop at impossible, Hin-Ho? Wasn't sure he wanted the answer, but the humans already had one. The stars above Drosk 7 didn't twinkle, they boiled. As the dropship Ashkelon pierced the atmosphere, its heat shielding screamed in protest. External cameras blacked out one by one, fried by friction hotter than re-entry tolerances allowed. Within the cockpit, klaxons shrieked and red lights pulsed like a failing heartbeat. Captain Serena Holt gritted her teeth. Her hands danced over manual override systems while the autopilot sputtered uselessly. Tavik, vent the starboard reservoir. We're going in hot. Her pilot, a lanky ex-colony runner with cybernetic eyes, swore under his breath. We'll cook the entire thruster array doing that. We'll die doing anything else. The hiss of venting plasma rocked the ship sideways, and then, mercifully, they broke through the worst of the upper atmosphere. The landscape below emerged through the fire, endless dunes of metallic sand, broken only by jagged basalt ridges that jutted like the bones of a dead god. Ashkelon to fleet. Final descent engaged. Signal will cut out in T-minus 30 seconds. No one responded. They hadn't in hours. The fleet was gone. They were alone. When the Ashkelon slammed into Drosk 7's crust, the impact buckled its landing struts and carved a trench half a kilometer long. The hull split open like a wounded animal, spilling crates, gear and groaning crew onto blistering rock. Serena pulled herself up from the scorched soil, helmet cracked, one arm bleeding where metal met flesh. She took stock. Out of the 58 personnel aboard, only 39 were moving. 3 were dead. The rest, burned, concussed, or too stunned to scream. Tavik limped over, visor coated in ash. We made it. She stared at him. We're not dead. That's not the same thing. He gave a hollow chuckle. You humans always split hairs on optimism. Serena surveyed the horizon, distorted by heat, rippling like an angry sea. The nearest rock formation was 2 clicks away. If they didn't move fast, they'd bake before nightfall. She activated her comms. All hands capable of movement, grab what you can carry. We move north-northeast. The rest get pulled or get left. A younger recruit, Brant, maybe 19, muttered. No evac? No regroup? No plan B, Serena replied. Welcome to the rest of your life. They called it Camp Toast, their first real shelter, carved into the shaded side of a basalt cliff. It was barely more than a hole in the ground, but it was cooler by 20 degrees and it didn't try to kill them outright. Serena and her engineers spent the first 3 weeks keeping people alive with scavenged gear, makeshift cooling rigs, and dehydrated rations. By week 4, they were cracking open soil samples, searching for water trapped beneath the rock. By week 6, they were eating glow fungus, a foul-tasting but nutritionally viable organism they biohacked from local lichen spores. By week 8, someone died of a lung collapse from breathing unfiltered dust. Serena stood over the body with stone in her throat. She didn't speak. She just dug the grave with her own hands. The first real argument came on day 60. Lieutenant Reyes slammed a makeshift data slab onto the communal table. We're all ready. Down 12. The council isn't sending a rescue op. They don't even know we're alive. We need to send a flare and wait for pickup. No one's coming, Serena replied, voice flat. They will if we call. No. They'll come if we build something worth calling about. Reyes's voice cracked. You want us to build a colony on this rock? This isn't a mission anymore, it's a tomb. Serena stood, walked to the open mouth of the cave and pointed to the horizon where another storm rolled across the dunes like liquid fire. We picked this. We don't get to quit because it hurts. If you want out, walk. The desert's waiting. Silence. Then, Reyes turned, grabbed a pack, and stepped into the light. No one followed. 3 days later, he returned, burned, dehydrated, coughing up blood. Serena didn't say a word, just handed him water, patched his arm, and let him collapse onto a thermal mat. Later that night, Reyes whispered to another crew member, She didn't even flinch. I thought she was insane. No, the medic replied. She's just from Mars. Drosk 7 wasn't killing them fast anymore. It was teaching them how to suffer smart. By month 4, the crew had stopped calling the planet Drosk 7. They called it the Burn. The name felt more honest. The Burn didn't just scorch flesh and metal. It attacked hope. The sky was never blue, only layers of sulfur yellow. Haze. The wind screamed day and night, laced with diamond dust and powdered iron. Sometimes they'd find tools shredded to ribbons after a single exposure cycle. The planet didn't fight them. It punished them. And still, they built. Captain. Serena Holt stood over a makeshift map carved into obsidian slate. Around her, a dozen crew members argued over resource routes and geothermal access. Most meetings devolved into shouting, but no one left the room. Walking out meant weakness. Weakness meant death. Geothermal vent 3 is flooding with sulfur. Gas, muttered Saito, their lead engineer. His voice was thin from the filtered respirators they all wore now. If we don't reroute, it'll blow by morning. Then we trench a pressure relief shaft, Serena replied. We don't have the tools. Then dig it with your damn hands. Nobody laughed anymore when she said things like that, because they all had. The first subterranean vault was finished. On day 137. It wasn't pretty, more like a sunken metal can, but it could hold 50 people and stay cool enough to sleep through the midday inferno. That night, huddled inside with sweat-damp uniforms and whirring air recyclers, Serena addressed the crew. Pain isn't a failure here, it's a teacher. The planet wants to break us, but it hasn't learned what humans are made of. She pointed to the ceiling above. Steel didn't build this place. We did. With broken tools and blistered hands and no guarantees. Brant, barely 19 and now missing 2 fingers from an excavation mishap, raised a battered mug. To the Burn. The cheer was tired, but real. To the Burn. By month 6, their tech was unrecognizable. Solar panels had been crushed, repurposed, and mounted on rotating arms to avoid sandblasts. Cooling units now doubled as fungal incubators. Their only remaining environmental drone had been cannibalized, for mobility. Its treads welded to a supply sled, driven by children between outposts they named Ashfield Springs and Hell's Cauldron. They weren't just enduring anymore, they were inventing. It was around this time Serena instituted what she called the 10% rule. Every 10th day, 10% of the crew was forbidden from doing survival work. No building, no hauling, no patrols, you'll rest, she declared. Or I'll sedate you and lock you in the vault myself. Some objected. Reyes, still bitter and limping from his failed walkabout, barked, We don't get breaks out, here. Serena's reply was cold steel. Neither do machines, but they break. It wasn't a kindness. It was a strategy. Burnout was deadlier than heat. The human mind could take only so much before it started seeing sandstorms as voices, shadows as monsters, the dust as crawling things. One poor technician, Evan Pierce, walked straight into a pressure funnel one night, convinced his dead brother was calling from it. There wasn't even a body left to bury. After that, no one argued about 10% again. One evening, as the red sun dipped below the jagged skyline, Reyes sat across from Serena near a trench wall, firelight flickering off their patched gear. I still think you're crazy, he said. His voice had lost its edge. But I get it now. Serena didn't look up. She was cleaning her knife, the same one she'd used to gut a sandcrawler earlier that day. Crazy's not a disadvantage here, he chuckled. No, I guess not. But you know we're still going to die out here, right? She sheathed the blade slowly. Then we'll die louder than anyone ever has on this rock. Above them, storms roared like a living god in agony. Below, the humans kept building, and for the first time in recorded history, Drosk 7 failed to kill what it swallowed. The diplomatic cruiser VCT Orathion pierced Drosk 7's upper atmosphere with a grace no human ship could match, sleek, silent, and utterly baffled. Instructor Valek stood at the observation pane, 7 eyes narrowed behind a polarized visor. The atmospheric buffer of the ship shimmered against the searing particulate winds. Outside, the red-tinged horizon heaved with heat distortion and metallic dust. "Approach vector locked," droned the pilot, a Thalcaran with silvery gills flexing nervously. "Temperature at surface, 164 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels, well, above lethal." Velik glanced at the readouts. He already knew the numbers. "Bring us down." Slowly, behind him, representatives from 5 species watched the landscape unfold with uneasy fascination. The Vrixie ambassador adjusted her breath mask. "You're certain this Fort Holt exists?" Velik's mandibles twitched. The human cadets' data was clean, too detailed to fake. Power signatures, real-time environmental readings. "They've been here for over 2 decades, the Denari envoy snorted. "They must be using off-world assistance, black market drones perhaps, or illegal AI. "No AI, Velik said flatly. "They built this by hand, with grit, rust, and pain." As if on cue, Fort Holt came into view, an industrial scar in a dead world. From above, it looked like a deep crater filled with mirrored domes, solar arrays, and sunken metal corridors. Observation pylons jutted skyward, wrapped in thermal shielding that glowed faintly. Farther out, dust haulers crawled over the dunes like insects. A column of smoke rose from a geothermal vent surrounded by heat-tolerant wind turbines. "By the ancestors," whispered the Thalkiran. "It's not just functional, it's growing." The Orathion landed amid swirling heat. The delegation disembarked quickly, forced to don specialized suits and rebreathers. Even with layers of shielding, the temperature gnawed at their bones, and then the humans came. They didn't march or salute. They walked, slow, deliberate, confident. Their suits were thick but flexible, painted in sand-matching camouflage. Most were scarred, patched, and visibly used. The men and women behind the masks stood in relaxed formation, weapons slung low, eyes alert. At the front stood Serena Holt, now grayer at the temples, her face half hidden behind a cracked helmet, visor. She looked exactly how Velik imagined a creature who dared the gods, and survived. Velik stepped forward. "Captain Holt, Instructor Velik of the Galactic Xeno Academy. I come bearing inquiry and disbelief." Holt gave a lopsided grin. "You're not the first." He gestured to the structures around them. "You've built a functioning colony on a Class 9 death world. No terraforming, no council assistance. Why?" "Because we were told we couldn't," Holt replied. One of the Danari bristled. "That is not a reason. That's a dare." "Exactly." The delegation was led inside Fort Holt, through triple-sealed airlocks into cooler tunnels dug into the basalt. The walls were reinforced with scavenged starship plating. Water dripped in places from condensation rigs. Children in heat suits ran past the group laughing. Food trays were handed to passing workers with casual ease. "What is that smell?" the Vrixie asked. "Real fungus," Serena said. "Spliced with an Earth-lichen genome, edible, grows in toxic rock. Don't sniff too long, it'll give you a headache." They passed a nursery full of heat lamps and a school with a hand-painted mural. "Pain is the plan," a motto, a promise. Velik couldn't speak for a full minute. At the colony's central hub, the delegation was shown a command room, solar maps, storm trackers, geothermal grids. Every data point meticulously logged, every power spike accounted for. "No AI?" the Thalkiran asked. "Just people," Serena replied. "We use what breaks, fix what we can, adapt the rest." Velik stepped toward a console, hesitated, then asked, "Why stay? Why not return to council space and report your success?" Serena's gaze hardened. "We're not done." He turned to her. "With what?" She stepped forward until their visors nearly touched. "With proving that impossible just means someone else hasn't tried hard enough." That night, from the observation tower, Velik watched the humans play a rough game in the dust. Throwing some weighted orb, shouting and laughing even as a heat storm brewed at the horizon. In their eyes, he saw no fear, only defiance. The galaxy had believed no one could conquer Drosk 7, but the humans hadn't come to conquer. They'd come to endure. And, that made them the most dangerous species he had ever known. The Great Hall of Sentience, located in neutral orbit above the pulsar Yukul-Nar, had witnessed the ratification of interstellar treaties, the collapse of civilizations, and the induction of entire species into the galactic fold. But it had never in recorded history fallen silent like it did the moment Instructor Valek finished speaking. And so, Valek concluded, the humans have not only survived Drosk 7, they have colonized it, independently, without terraforming, without council aid, without even a viable evacuation route. They have established 8 permanent structures, a breeding population, and what I can only describe as culture. His words echoed across the chamber. The holographic image of Fort Holt hung above the center dais, crude and blocky compared to the sleek orbital cities of the Vrixi or the crystalline enclaves of the Danari, but undeniably alive. Power flowed. Drones crawled. People moved. Children played beneath a burning sky. The silence was broken by a hiss from Counselor Dreskivar of the Jarathi Combine. Impossible. Fabricated. Valek turned calmly. We stood on their soil. We tasted their fungus bread. I bled from my gill pores due to radiation exposure. It is real. Perhaps they have off-world support, muttered Ambassador Sierra of the Owl Vinor. Smuggling? A rogue faction? They built it from the wreck of a single dropship, said Valek, and they did it with a philosophy so alien to us I hesitate to even call it logical. That sparked murmurs. High Ambassador Gralva of the Thalkiran stood. Explain. Valek shifted his weight, mandibles twitching. They call it, pain is the plan. What kind of suicidal doctrine is that? Asked a Zalathi delegate. Valek's voice grew colder. It is not suicidal. It is transformative. They do not avoid hardship. They embrace it. They do not wait for comfort. They break themselves upon necessity and consider that a virtue. Silence heavier than vacuum fell across the chamber. The Daanari rose slowly. We have quarantined Drosk 7 for centuries. No known ecosystem, no technological species, only death. And now, humans thrive there? They thrive, Valek repeated. And they breed and they build. The Jarathi ambassador spat a burst of acidic mist. Then they must be stopped. That snapped Valek's posture straight. Stopped? Yes, hissed Dreskivar. Containment failed. The humans are incompatible with regulated expansion. They disobey every warning, disregard every prohibition. They survive where they should not, thrive where life should die. They are a contagion of resilience. A storm of argument erupted. Species yelled in overlapping languages. Counselors thrashed their limbs and pulsed their skin pigments in outrage. Some called for a blockade. Others demanded an alliance. A few, the most terrified, quietly proposed eradication. Valek raised his voice only once. If you seek to remove the humans from Drosk 7, you must understand what that means. He gestured, and the hologram above shimmered, zooming into the mural painted inside Fort Holt, a child's handprint beside bold, shaky lettering. Pain is the plan. They will not run. They will not yield. You can bomb them from orbit, but they'll tunnel deeper, poison the land. They'll purify it. Break their tools, they'll use stone and bone. You will teach them how to suffer better. He turned in a slow circle, his voice rising like the gravity of a black star. They did not survive Drosk 7. They domesticated it. What do you think they'll do next? The chamber fell utterly still. Then, High Ambassador Gralva spoke, again, softly, as if weighing the weight of centuries. They are not just a species. Valek nodded. No, they are a momentum. Hours later, in a private corridor beneath the council chambers, Valek walked alone, until a voice behind him whispered, "You defend them well." He turned. Serena Holt's face flickered on a secure comlink embedded into his wrist. "Did they listen?" she asked. "They heard," Valek said. "But listening? That takes longer." Serena smirked. "We're not going anywhere, Instructor." "I know," he said. "That's what terrifies them." The infiltration craft VNS Harrowlight was cloaked, silent, and illegal. It descended through Drosk 7's atmosphere on a vector masked by a passing ash storm. Inside, 3 members of the Council's Special Rebalance Division, a polite euphemism for sanctioned interference, braced in sealed drop pods. Their mission was precise: undermine Fort Holt's geothermal grid, disable communication arrays, evaporate momentum. Minimal force, Agent Orvin growled into his mask. We don't want martyrs. We want setbacks. Understood, replied Lyrix, the youngest of the team, whose glistening gray tendrils twitched with nerves. How do we avoid exposure? You don't, said Jek, the Danari. You wear heat suits. If they catch you, you lie. If you fail, don't expect extraction. Outside, Drosk 7 wailed with the fury of a dying star. They landed 20 kilometers from Fort Holt, trekking under the cover of night, though night on Drosk 7 was a matter of dimmer fire, not cooler air. Every step on the obsidian dunes crunched with glass and bone. Radiation ticked in their helmets like a countdown. Hours later, the perimeter came into view. It was worse than expected. The humans had grown stronger. The geothermal infrastructure had tripled in size. Thermal ducts, now tunneled through the crust, feeding a circular grid powered by the planet's fury itself. Wind barriers hummed with kinetic energy. Light domes had bloomed, whole neighborhoods beneath mirrored shields. Children ran in reinforced suits with chalk, drawing murals on blast doors. Focus, Orvin whispered. Lyrix, you hit the vent. Regulators. Jek, take the comm tower. I'll sabotage the main grid control. Jek made it halfway up the tower before something moved. Not a security drone, not an alarm. A child. Small, maybe 10, wearing a suit with patches and an old Earth military insignia on the chest. U.S. Navy. The child was crouched beside a wall panel, tightening a bolt with a rusted wrench. Jek froze. The child saw him. Instead of running, the child tilted his head and said over external comms, "You're not from around here, huh?" Jek blinked. "No." "You should be careful," the child continued, not afraid. "This place bites." And with that, he walked away, into the shadows. Jek couldn't plant the virus. Lyrix reached the geothermal regulator chamber, set down her disruptor device, and scanned the cooling pipes. She marveled. The construction was hand-welded, imprecise, yet functional, not built for elegance, built to endure and covered in chalk markings, not vandalism, notations, temperature readings, chemical conversions, calculations scrawled by someone who learned science by firelight. They weren't just surviving, they were engineering. She stood there too long. "Need help?" asked a woman's voice from behind. Lyrix spun. A tall human leaned against the doorway, face obscured, but her posture was relaxed, confident, watching. "You're not one of us," the woman said. "No," Lyrix admitted. "I figured. You've still got fear in your walk." Lyrix lowered her hand from her disruptor. "Aren't you going to raise the alarm?" The woman, Serena Holt herself, smiled. "We don't need to. You're going to leave on your own." Lyrix hesitated. "Why?" "Because now you've seen us. Not heard about us. Not imagined us as monsters. You've walked on our dirt. You've felt the heat. And you know, deep down, that if you try to break us," Serena stepped forward until their visors touched, "you'll just teach us how to fight better." Back at the rendezvous, Orvin waited alone. He'd made it into the grid control hub, set the charges. Timers ready. He'd stood there sweating, heart pounding, and then he'd looked at the mural painted across the control panel. It was Serena again. This time, she held a child on one shoulder, both figures standing atop a mountain of broken machines, holding a banner that read, "We belong where others failed." He'd disarmed the charges, quietly, carefully. The VNS Harrowlight lifted off at dawn, cloaked and silent. None of the agents spoke until they passed orbit. Then Lyrix broke the silence. "What do we tell the Council?" Orvin didn't hesitate. "Tell them the planet's too dangerous, too unpredictable, not worth the risk." He stared down at the glowing scar that was Fort Holt. "Tell them to stay away." Drosk 7 no longer slept alone in the void. 3 new ships orbited the scorched planet, Not warships, not council-sanctioned probes. These were smaller, older, dented, and patched like the hulls of people desperate enough to try something human. Each came from a different world. Each flew under no banner, and each hailed Fort Holt with the same message. We want to learn. Serena Holt stood at the comms panel in Fort Holt's central command dome, flanked by her second-in-command Ramos, and a skeptical engineering officer, Chen. The atmosphere inside was cool by Drosk standards, a balmy 52-degree sag. 3 ships. 1 Vrixi, 1 Denari, 1 Independent, Chen muttered. None authorized by the Council. You want me to scramble the solar cannon? No, Serena said. Let them land. Ramos frowned. We're not a school, Cap. We're barely a city. We were less than that when we started, Serena replied. They're not coming because we advertised. They're coming because no one else made it. She paused, then said, almost softly, they're coming for the truth. The first to step off her ship was Vrixi outcast engineer Rev Tal, her 6 eyes hidden behind soot-streaked optics. Her suit was cobbled together with human heat resin and strips of alien alloy. She held out her hands, not in supplication, but with oil-stained fingers. I read about you, she said. They said no one survives Drosk, but you adapted. Serena nodded. We suffered. Rev Tal smiled. I'd like to suffer better. The Denari was named Fostrel, and he arrived alone. No entourage, no weapon. My people value order, he said, voice modulated through a throat box. But I have seen what order becomes without meaning. I watched your mural in the council records. Pain is the plan. It is brutal. And true, Serena said. I want to learn how to make truth out of hardship. The last ship belonged to a quiet, bone-thin creature who refused to give a name. His species wasn't registered in any of Fort Holt's archives. Why are you here? Ramos asked him. The creature turned one enormous eye to the searing sky. I heard the humans tamed the sun. Within days, the newcomers were digging alongside engineers, sleeping in spare bunks, rotating through water rations like any Holt-born child. They choked on dust, burned their hands on overheated tools, cried from nosebleeds and raw lungs, and yet they stayed. Rev Tal helped redesign a cooling grid using Vrixi plasma vents. Fostrel taught a class on Denari internal chemistry, how to control pain like temperature. The nameless alien sat with children and taught them to sing in a pitch that calmed migraines from radiation sickness. It wasn't teaching, not the way the council defined it. It was exchange. Meanwhile, on a distant council station, Instructor Velik stood before a growing panel of curious delegates. This time, they hadn't come to argue. They had come to ask. You say the humans built a colony from a wreck, said one Zelathi. And now others join them? They do, Velik replied. Will they survive? He looked them each in the eye, voice slow and quiet. They won't just survive, they'll change, and they'll change us. A counselor scoffed. You think they're better than us? No, Velik said. I think they're worse, harder, harsher, but not wrong. And in this galaxy, maybe that's what we need. That night on Drosk 7, Serena stood atop the southern tower of Fort Holt, staring into a storm of burning dust and starlight. Next to her stood Rev Tal, who clutched a tattered notebook filled with sketches. I have a plan, Rev Tal said, for cooling vents that can survive a direct solar flare. With help from the Denari. Serena raised an eyebrow. That'd be a first? Rev Tal laughed, then fell quiet. Do you think we're changing the galaxy? No, Serena said. Rev Tal turned to her, surprised. I think we're giving it permission. And high above, new ships approached the world no one had dared touch for 1,000 years. Not to conquer, but to learn how to live. The summons came in a crimson packet, one that bore no title, no seal, just coordinates, time, and a single phrase. Final resolution, humanity and Drosk 7. Serena Holt read it twice before setting it on the dusty table in Fort Holt's command dome. She didn't flinch, she didn't curse, she simply called for Ramos. Get the council team ready, we're going to orbit. Ramos grimaced. Back into their house? No, Serena said, glancing out the porthole toward the harsh white sky. They're stepping into ours. They're hosting it above Drosk 7. That meant only one thing. They wanted to see the fire before deciding if they'd put it out. The chamber floated in orbit, silver and sterile, with walls that reflected every movement twice, once in light, once in judgment. Serena arrived with Ramos, Revtal, and Fostrel. The nameless alien came too, uninvited but unquestioned, drifting silently in their wake. Instructor Velik was already there. His gaze met Serena's. No words were exchanged. There was nothing left to say. At the center of the chamber, Counselor Dreskivar of the Yorathi stood tall and rigid. She spoke without warmth. Humans, you are hereby summoned under Galactic Ordinance 445B. You have defied planetary restriction, encouraged cross-species, unrest, and introduced destabilizing philosophies to neutral regions. Revtal scoffed. Survival is now destabilization? You call it survival, Dreskivar snapped. We call it contagion. The chamber stirred with tension. Counselors leaned forward. The vote had not yet come, but it loomed. Velik rose. I have submitted over 200 hours of footage, biological analysis, socio-cultural mapping. Every metric confirms it. The humans have accomplished what no species has done in recorded galactic history. They have turned a death world into a cradle. By sheer madness, muttered someone. By will, Velik corrected. Then he turned to Serena. Captain Holt, if the council permits, you may speak. Serena stepped forward, not in ceremonial robes, not in polished uniform. She wore her heat-worn gear, scratched, patched, and soaked with the ash of her planet. You want to know if we're a threat, she said plainly. You want to know if what we built is a fluke or a revolution? She pointed down toward the barren world below. Drosk 7 didn't want us. That planet tried to cook us, choke us, break our minds. It took people I loved. It took pieces of me. But every time it tried, we answered with grit. Pain is the plan. Not because we enjoy it, because we learn from it. She looked at each species, her eyes fierce. You've all built worlds to avoid pain. We built one to understand it. So when it comes again, and it will in one form or another, don't call us savages. Her voice lowered. Call us ready. Silence followed. And then, the council began to vote. 3 green lights. 5 yellow, 4 red, 1 blinking blue, a tie, Dreskivar hissed. A draw. By protocol, the tiebreaker falls to the observing delegate. All heads turned. To Velik. He stood slowly, every joint clicking. For centuries, we told ourselves that Drosk 7 was dead. A world meant only for warnings, a graveyard of ambition. He turned to Serena. And then came the humans. He pressed the panel. Green. The verdict is cast, the high chair intoned. Drosk 7 remains autonomous. Humanity is recognized as sovereign. The delegation returned to Fort Holt under the firelight of a triple dawn. But the celebration would wait, because Drosk 7 had one final test. A solar flare, Category Gamma, erupted without warning. The horizon burned white. Temperatures spiked. Old alloys cracked. Power dipped. And still, the people ran, not away, but into the storm. Revtal led coolant floods into overpressure pipes. Fostrel passed out redroot syringes to regulate blood temperature. The nameless alien sang through the quake, its harmonics calming a panicked child. And Serena? She stood atop the southern tower, issuing orders, tethered to the antenna mast with a heat-scorched cable, shouting above the wind, no retreat. This is the plan. Pain is the plan. When it passed, the city stood, exhausted, but standing. Months later, on planets across the galaxy, murals appeared. Not official, not paid, just chalk on steel, a soldier beside a child, a sun turned into a furnace, and always, the words, they survived where none could. They burned and stayed. Epilogue Instructor Velik returned to his academy. His class was full. The desert module, it was no longer skipped. And at the start of every term he asked the same question: who can survive the unsurvivable? And now, every hand rose. Because across the stars, they remembered. The humans didn't beat the desert. They became it.